Good afternoon, everyone. Well, actually, generally we would be covering feeds, speeds, etc. in an Intel session. But today, I guess we'll talk about something different in line with the theme of the event. We're talking about digital transformation. So probably I want to share with you, I've got around 15 minutes. I'll run you through some of the stuff we are seeing changing in the landscape, and I'm sure a lot of you will relate to it also. So just to introduce myself, I'm Manish Mody. I'm delighted to be here at this Fujitsu event. I'm part of the division in Intel which we call the Influencer Sales Group. This division mainly focuses on with end customers, leading enterprises globally across verticals, be telcos, healthcare, manufacturing, etc. And one of the things we do is we don't sell directly to you, but of course through our partners. There's a whole lot of product development happening across the spectrum. We've been focused on the data center space, the client space, that's the desktops, the notebooks, servers, etc. Of course, we're seeing a big shift happening towards the IoT space. My focus area is in particular around the IoT space, and we do believe while we work across segments, be it the transportation segments, the healthcare, the education verticals, where we are seeing increasing adoption of the IoT-based solutions. And I want to share no products out here, but probably some of the trends that we're seeing evolving in the landscape and how we're seeing the role of the IT people within organizations also shifting. So just to talk about the vortex of change, if you look at it, I'm sure you're seeing the changes, like I mentioned, around you shift, the pace at which things are changing, and I guess we're being flattened out. No organization today, big or small, meaning everyone's looking at what's happening next. And no organization, big or small, if they're not agile, they're not innovative, meaning you will last long. And that's why we're seeing even small companies, the likes of Uber, Ola, etc., within country we're seeing evolving. There's been a major shift, a major evolution happening in the ecosystem. So let me talk about, I'll start off talking about the unprecedented growth, the innovation that's happening in the ecosystem. That's just phenomenal. And this has led to a whole lot of evolution happening in the ecosystem. So if you see in the space, if you look on the extreme right-hand side, right from 1950 to 2000, in 2000 onwards, the amount of innovation that's happened in the ecosystem, the shared economy that we're talking about, it's just been phenomenal. What this has put, like I mentioned, on traditional companies, this has led to rise of the connected as a service, which disrupts across entire industries. If someone, one of our execs put it nicely, when the dot-com burst happened, people said the dot-com business is kind of peaked out. But if you see the kind of things we are seeing, earlier we used to talk about within Intel also, we're looking at 1 billion devices being connected to the internet. If you look at the reports which are being given out by Gartner, etc., we're talking about 50 billion IoT devices themselves. So the number of devices which would light up the front end and would enable the data center business, the growth of the data center business is phenomenal. I guess it's nicely put up. If you were to kind of see the growth happening today, the internet, the growth which is happening on the internet space, it's like if you were to reflect it or equal it to a movie, I guess we're just starting off in the opening credits. I guess the way I would see this is in three phases. Today, if you see what people are talking about, we are in the third revolution. The first revolution, of course, was driven by the coal and steam engines. The early 1900s, electrification came. That drove the second wave. And this third wave, which is being driven, is by the compute and the communication infrastructure, which is where we're seeing this whole wave of digitization happening. So, while we're talking about this phenomenal innovation happening behind the scenes, within enterprises, it's creating a vortex of change. And if I were to talk about some of the growth inhibitors, the enablers, etc., or the challenges that we could talk about, I would like to bucket them into 4 areas. First, of course, the business efficiency and the agility part. Of course, no one's got an endless budget, including Narendra Modi. I guess there's a fixed income that you have, and I guess you got to manage within that. And same's the case with all IT execs also. The second part is, of course, with this phenomenal growth rate of the data that's exploding, how do you manage the trust part, the security part, the privacy, compliance issues? How do you mitigate risks? And of course, now we're seeing when you're talking about data centers growing globally, the sovereign issues also coming into play. The third piece is, of course, innovative new business models. So if automobile companies were happy selling directly to end consumers, I guess you're now dealing with Uber and Ola. And of course, we've seen press releases wherein automobile companies are tying up with these shared economy businesses to kind of sell their services or their models in a very different fashion. And finally, the macroeconomic effect we're talking about. There's very little you could do about this, the way things are playing out in the ecosystem. But I'll talk about, from a technology perspective, how we are seeing or how we kind of contributed in a fashion to enable this disruptive growth. Of course, meaning if you were to look at talking a little more about each of the challenges I mentioned, business efficiency and agility. All organizations, I guess, if you look at all global organizations, are restructuring themselves. How do you realign, refocus, revitalize the entire organization, right from employees to the infrastructure, to really move from the industrial static approach to a more dynamic, where you could really respond with velocity to changes? We started talking about this around 2 years back, where we said workplace transformation. If you look at the businesses or the IT infrastructure also, that's also going through a dramatic foundational change. In fact, people are talking about, you're talking about segregated or distributed workforces, you're talking about workforces. The youth, in fact, do not want to be tied into certain legacy infrastructure. When I say legacy infrastructure, meaning they like to operate from mobile phones, you have to keep all those options open. And that's really disruptful from an organization perspective. How do you handle those challenges? And fundamentally, if you ask me, I guess if you talk to any design engineer or an automobile firms, today, it's interesting to see if you were to talk to Maruti, one of these organizations, around 4 or 5 years back, they would talk about coming up with 1 or 2 models every year. And I was just reading an article wherein the top execs of Maruti is talking about by 2020, we'll have 20 models coming out. So I don't think you have the luxury of, let's say, having 2 years, 3 years for coming out with one platform. So it's different dynamics, different changes, etc. And I guess we're talking about a world wherein services have to happen on the fly. It's not about being able to give a service to the business units in 15 minutes, in 3 months' time or 6 months' time. We're talking about minutes. In fact, 24/7, that's the approach we're talking about. And of course, when you look at the security piece, in fact, I do believe security is going to, especially when it comes to the IoT space where I focus, this is going to be one of the biggest challenges. How do you manage this? In fact, when you start lighting up all those devices, these could be the HVACs, these could be the industrial machines, etc. You're not sure from wherein you could be attacked. I guess Target's the best example. Through the HVAC or the air conditioning system, the hackers entered into the billing systems. So we're talking about, and interesting stats. If you look at the cyber crime business, since this was mentioned, it's a $1 trillion economy. If you were to equalize this to the pharma and the distribution business, even those guys don't have this kind of scale of business. In fact, 78% of organizations don't even realize there's an issue in their setup, or they've been kind of hacked. And the time to respond, especially in this connected world, that's another challenge. And finally, of course, with all these devices, multiple devices, multiple platforms, how do you still manage your compliance? And of course, how do you, for global companies, this will be a big challenge. When you're operating across 65, 70 countries, you've got data centers across, you're addressing different customers. How do you take care of the sovereign issues? That's going to be a challenge. So I guess fundamentally it's how much is the data worth? I guess we could keep layering security, meaning putting security right from, in fact, that's what something we kind of trying to do at the platform level. Right from the platform level where we start making the platforms more secure. And of course, we tie in our security features to the software layer also. And I guess you will see this significant trust happening. In fact, recently we've had news where Yahoo, wherein 500 million accounts have been kind of hacked. And if you had some of your payment banking details or accounts linked to your email account, I guess there's a potential threat which Yahoo's anyway called out. So this is another challenge we're talking about from a security perspective. I guess this is one of the biggest disruptors to any large global organization today. Just to give you an idea today, just imagine, while Uber and Airbnb are famous, imagine if you're traveling to Bhopal, and of course you could go to a CCD or a Starbucks, etc., and spend some time there, have your office meetings, etc. But just imagine you want a quiet space where you want to do some calls, etc. Imagine if you could pay $20 or let's say 800 rupees and book an office space for 600 or 800 rupees for 4 hours, etc. You're actually on the fly booking office space, and that's what liquid space does. So just imagine the business disruptions these kind of companies will bring to the standard economy. And Mr. Mahindra, Anand Mahindra, when they tied up with Ola, they're looking at actually having a tie-up across the organization. It's just not about giving the automobile companies, they're targeting around 40,000 vehicles over the next couple of years. And they said that we are just not looking at it from selling vehicles, we're also looking at the financing arm, etc. And one of the statements he made was very nice. If we are addressing customers who believe in shared mobility, then I guess this is the model to adopt. And you see how organizations also are changing to address this landscape. So this is what I said, meaning macroeconomy, there's nothing much you could do, but I guess this is very nicely put. Every 2 years, we've kind of doubling the transistors on every silicon that we make. Every CPU that we make our transistors smaller and smaller. So we've gone all the way from 65 nanometers, we've come down to almost 14, and probably 9 nanometers is next in on the design. And in Intel language, we equate it to Moore's law. So we'll double the number of transistors every 2 years, and then in a nutshell, from an end consumer, that kind of doubles the performance. If this had not been happening at the pace it was, probably we would still be in the 1999 era. Because once you start making your transistors smaller and smaller, you get the luxury of adding more functionalities. Across compute, across the telecom equipment, or any communication infrastructure. Okay, we've talked enough of the trends, the challenges, etc. From a business standpoint, or when we look at it from, let's say, organizations, how do we address this? In fact, we are seeing a convergence from the traditional economy to the digital economy. Both of them are converging. And I'll talk about some of the things we've seen within Intel itself. In fact, we've tied up with BMW, where we are looking at getting a compute inside every vehicle that will be launched by them, so that that data, when it is sent to a backend data center, we could do analysis on the driver behavior, the health of the vehicle, driverless cars. So those are kind of evolution we are seeing. Traditional economies kind of tying up with digital economies, and how do we really bring value to you as end customers? If you look at the traditional watch companies, that's another example. Tag Heuer, where they've tied up with digital companies, and actually we're looking at a smart watch which is based on IA, Intel architecture. The Basis watch is another good example. Apple Watch, well known. And of course, banking. the kind of evolution we are seeing traditional bankings, I needn't say anything out here because we've seen technology adoption at the maximum in the banking vertical. And of course, the last on the slide, that's my subject, the way we're seeing things evolve in the IoT and the smart city space. And I'm sure you're seeing it in pockets here and there. On the fly today, I guess we're seeing social information. Soon you will have the traditional infrastructure, the buildings, everything connected on your smartphones. You will be able to in a position to control the lighting equipment, the air conditioning equipment, your service levels where you follow up with your customers or with your vendors. You have icons like Hitachi, etc., where you actually call up on a regular basis, 3 months to the service guys. That will all get automated as time flies. So imagine the amount of disruption where we're seeing traditional and IT companies, and that's opening up new opportunities. And I'll tell you this, since I've been focused on smart cities in particular, no one organization could do it all. And we're seeing small organizations also adding value to the entire stack, be it transportation segment, be surveillance segment, etc. We are finding niche players and they're adding immense value in this IoT landscape. From a digital business perspective, since we're talking about convergence, once you have that, what are the important pillars? Of course, you're talking about data-driven. Data is the new money. And this is where you will find people, and good examples we're seeing. If you see the IoT landscape, in Australia what they're doing is, let's say BKC is a populated area where you have 200,000 people coming on a daily basis. Parking is going to be scarce. Can the MMRD officials come up with a model wherein they say, okay, people traveling here, we're going to charge you, let's say, 100 rupees an hour. If you were to park somewhere in Kalina where they have parking space, on the fly, we'll reduce the parking charges. That's incentivizing you as a user, consumer, to really look at things differently. Smart world, on the fly, today I guess, for those of you who depend on public transport, you're still waiting for the buses, you don't know where the bus is, you wait for half an hour, etc. Soon we're reaching a stage where everything's going to be connected. Real-time basis, you'll get information, where the next train, what time it's going to come, where the bus is, what location. If there's a traffic jam, information is available on the bus stop, etc. We're seeing that evolving. And that's going to soon happen in India too. But it's already happened in a few cities. On-demand infrastructure. If you look at it from an organization perspective, I don't think you have the luxury of telling businesses that we're going to take 2-3 months to deliver this new service to you. I guess it's on the fly, 24/7. Finally, it's going to be trusted. Brand value will become an important factor here. If Target or Yahoo is hacked, or Sony for that matter, the brand takes a beating. So platforms need to be secure. Connected experience, be it anything, I guess everyone's looking for a good experience. When you have a 24/7 digital business, I guess be the banking vertical or the animation vertical, the connected experience is going to be critical. And finally, of course, you need an innovative workforce, which is place independent, how they could really transform stuff, come up with innovative ideas, disruptive stuff, and it requires a fundamental change in the way we do business. So delivering transformation, we're talking about business outcomes. So big data analytics, with all the big data, we're talking about transform business with trusted data, real-time data. Smart, drive operational excellence and revenue via extended insights. So when you look at, when you talk to municipal officials or government officials today, every urban city does not have an unlimited budget. So the investments that are required today are humongous. In fact, the discussions we are having with industries also, when they approach these urban ministries, are coming with interesting ideas, wherein we're looking at interesting models, wherein the industry also believes they could monetize the technology investments over a period of time. So those are kind of discussions we're having. Those are the insights typically when it comes to the smart IoT world is what you would need. And like I said, right, if you were to look at the stats last year, for new technology investments which were done, 55% investments were driven by business, was not by the IT guys. So it gives you a good perspective. Now we are seeing the IT becoming more of a hand in hand, they're working with the business guys and actually delivering to the 24/7, reduce IT, operational technology and cost, increase agility. Trusted security, I've talked about it. Perceptual computing, and finally, of course, innovative workforce. These are some of the segments you would have to look at, especially in this digital economy or digital transformation journey. Finally, I've mentioned this, business-funded technology will account for 55% of total IT spend in 2014. That's the analysis. This was done by IDC. Now, IT, organizations, instead of, when you look at business and IT instead of being a technology provider to the business, is actually becoming an orchestrator where they're saying, okay, we'll reach out to the industry, we'll reach out, get you the solution, we'll get you the services on the fly on a 24/7 basis. And business and information, IT is going to become the business processor and the information expert. They're not going to be the nuts and bolts providers as such. This is the only slide, like I said, I have one slide on the product side. If you look at from Intel perspective, even we fundamentally looked at a business very differently. Today we have a huge chunk of business which is addressing the cloud, the data center business. We've actually looked at the security piece, the compute piece, the networking, the infra. It's just not about the compute. We've looked at the entire end-to-end value proposition on the data center side. On the memory side, we do believe, if you look at on the storage side, the hard disk space, the performance has not kept pace with the requirements of the compute. In fact, there's a big imbalance. In fact, a couple of years back, we had a metric wherein every 6 years, every 2 years, we doubled our CPU performance, our compute performance. Memory doubled its performance every 6 years. Memory is expensive. There's a big gap. In fact, we're looking at 3D point and new memory technologies, wherein we're looking at giving you immense memory capacities at a fraction of the cost compared to existing memory prices. And then finally, of course, when you look at the big data or the analytics space, we do believe there will be certain kind of compute which will be repetitive, which it require, we're talking about deep learning, etc., where we believe the FPGAs, the specialized cards will play a big role. If I were to sum it up, finally, like I said, we don't sell things directly to you. Of course, we work with our partners like Fujitsu, esteemed partners like Fujitsu, and we'll deliver this entire, the last slide I show you, all this product portfolio through Fujitsu. Thank you so much for your time.